welcome back to App Stories. Today's episode is brought to you by Pillow and Memberful. I'm John Voorhees, and with me is Federico Viticci. Hey, Federico.
Hello, John. How are you?
I'm doing really well. Well, it's iOS 16 day. How do you feel getting that review out?
I feel exhausted, but I'm also very happy that I was able to get it done once again, ready in time for day one of a new version of iOS. So I'm really, really happy.
Yeah, I know you've been very busy. I've been getting late night text messages, and I think you've been up later than me even a few nights, which is crazy and bonkers since you're 6 hours ahead of me. But in any event, you do what you got to do to get finished, and I'll be doing the same thing soon enough with macOS. During the pre-show today, Federico explained a little bit about the behind the scenes, how the review was put together, what tools he used, and some of the perks that we're going to have for Club MacStories members.
Yes.
So if you want to listen to that pre-show, you can subscribe to App Stories Plus by going to appstories.plus, or you can also subscribe to the club, because the club is where not only if you're a Premier member, you get App Stories Plus, but you get all of the perks, including our Discord and all the things that Federico's doing around his review. He's always does the ebook, and he's got a bunch of other stuff cooking that's going to be out too. And we'll have a post on MacStories that really kind of lays it out for everybody, so you can know what it is, where to get it, and when it's coming out, because it's going to be a fun-filled week at MacStories and Club MacStories.
Yeah, we always like to do all these extras around the review, right? Because it's such a big project,
right?
And there's so many related things, whether it's App Stories or an Obsidian plugin or extra content like the making of, behind the scenes, some shortcuts that I'm preparing for MacStories Weekly. So there's definitely a lot of things happening for club members and App Stories listeners. So we'll have a usual post that's, puts it very easy for everybody. So you can have a list, you can see, okay, who gets access to what. And we're going to have a guide, basically, to tell you all the things that we're doing in addition to the story that you can read for free right now on MacStories.net.
Yeah, exactly. And, it's nice to be able to do this as part of App Stories as well. We've made this kind of tradition every year with your review.
Yeah.
And App Stories Plus just makes it even better, because the show's always extended and comes out early, although not this week because of the review itself, but it comes out in high bit rate audio and ad-free as well. So you can subscribe to App Stories Plus at appstories.plus. And if you're interested in the club, go check out plus.club, because we have all the details there about the difference between the various membership tiers, what each one gets you. And a lot of that will be all detailed in the post that Federico mentioned on MacStories as well. So you can look there if you want more detail too.
Yeah.
All right, Federico, let's dig into this review, because as we record this a little early, a little in advance of the actual release, I have read the entire review. It's a fantastic review. I want to congratulate you at the very top of this on another job really well done. I think that over the years, I've been reading your work since before you and I even knew each other. But in particular, over the last several years, I think you've really kind of hit a good balance of, that brings out, I think, your personality and thoughts really well without getting bogged down in technical details, because that's very easy to do, because these OSs are very detailed and there's a lot of things and you want to tell everybody about them. But if you're not careful, it becomes kind of a list or a technical manual, which is not really, I don't think, what MacStories readers are looking for either. Instead, I think what you've done really well here is hit the highlights, explain what's going to be impactful in people's lives, and give some, good tidbits about how they can make the most of all these new features that are coming in iOS 16.
Yeah, I'm really happy that you mentioned that, because I one of the things that I've been working toward for the past few years was to make the review more accessible, to not get bogged down in those technical details again, which is a mistake I did in the past, but, there was no template for me to follow. So I had to discover what I like and what works and what doesn't on my own. And also what I like to write, because I think that's also important, I didn't want to write a manual. I didn't want to write a feature checklist or a feature comparison. I wanted to have a review, which should be a combination of opinions and details. And I think for the past 3 years, especially, I've been working toward that goal of making the reviews more compact, more accessible, by focusing on the features that MacStories readers and normal people will actually use and find in their daily usage of iPhone and iPad. Now, obviously, these reviews, by definition, by their own nature, they are not as accessible as, say, a quick guide on TikTok, right? That's not the type of audience that I'm going after. That's not the type of content that I'm producing. But I also feel like, and I mentioned this before, I also feel like in the past, I had reviews that were more maybe focused on, like, I had entire sections that were focused on developer frameworks and API related changes. That's not what I like to write, and that's not the kind of content that I think people enjoy. And this year, even more, after I decided to split the review in two. This is just an iOS review. I don't talk about the iPad. There's not a single iPad screenshot in this story. And I talk about that process in the pre-show for App Stories Plus listeners. But once I decided that, it made things even easier for me in terms of, understanding what are the key features for consumers and for users this year that I think MacStories readers are really going to appreciate and are going to be interested into learning more about them. And obviously that one of them was the lock screen, and something else, notes and reminders, app shortcuts in the Shortcuts app. So that kind of stuff. And then, me, I like to have my own thoughts. I have opinions. Sometimes you may not agree with all of them. And I like to have my funny jokes, my funny references in the screenshots, and my pop culture callbacks here and there sprinkled throughout the story, and my footnotes. I love my footnotes. So it's, I like to have fun when I put together these stories, because I want them to be unique. I want them to be something that I can be proud of years from now. So hopefully people will continue to appreciate the effort that goes into producing these stories, and hopefully people will like, the fact that it's a split review this time. iOS and iPadOS to come later. I don't know when. Later.
Yeah, we don't yet, but we'll find out soon enough. I think it's great that you've got the little flares of personality in these reviews, Federico, because what it does is it makes them not just informative, but also entertaining. And it's just easier to read something that's, a lengthy review like this if it's entertaining along the way. So I think that's a great approach. This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Pillow. More and more studies show that getting a good night's sleep can help improve your health and well-being in more ways than one. Pillow is the simple app that can help you be more aware of your sleep patterns and to make informed decisions to help improve your sleep quality. All you have to do is wear your Apple Watch while you sleep. Pillow will track and analyze your sleep automatically and give you a full report in the morning. If you want to use Pillow with just an iPhone or an iPad, you can do that too with the press of a button before going to bed. With an Apple Watch, you can also get important information about your heart rate trend, variability, heart rate dip, and blood oxygen levels for each sleep session. You can even record sounds while you sleep, things like sleep talking, sleep apnea, snoring, or other noises that might be disturbing your sleep. And if your Apple Watch is a Series 6 or newer, Pillow will also display information about the intensity of those sounds during each sleep session and give you a rating of each exposure. Another valuable aspect of Pillow is helping you stay informed so you can make decisions to improve your sleep. Pillow comes with a dedicated section where you can discover trends, get personalized insights, sleep tips, and easily compare your sleep metrics with your weight, steps, caffeine consumption, and other health metrics. If you want to wind down or relax before going to sleep or listen to something throughout the night, Pillow comes with an expanding collection of sleep aid sounds, guided meditations, bedtime stories, and music produced specifically for sleep. And if you can take a nap, you can do that too with Pillow's Power Nap mode. Pillow can wake you up using your iPhone, Apple Watch, or iPad at the lightest possible sleep stage using its smart alarm feature. And starting with watchOS 6, Pillow's battery consumption is minimal too. Last but not least, Pillow is very privacy-minded. All of your sleep and audio data is stored and encrypted on your device and in your iCloud storage account using end-to-end encryption. You don't need to register or create an account to use Pillow either. You can use it anonymously, and it doesn't collect or send your personal data anywhere else. Pillow is free to download from the App Store and comes with a set of terrific features that you can use every day for free. If you want to try out Pillow's premium features, there's also a 7-day free trial. Just visit pillow.app to get started today. Again, that URL to try out Pillow is pillow.app. Our thanks to Pillow for their support of the show. Let's dive into the actual details instead of just talking about the meta stuff. I really want to get your thoughts on lock screens and widgets and how focus modes tie into this. I mean, this is really, having read the review, this is the heart of iOS 16 this year, isn't it?
I really think so. I feel like there's a ton of sort of quality of life improvements scattered throughout iOS 16, some changes to apps like Notes and Reminders, as I mentioned. But the one feature, the reason why people will upgrade to iOS 16 today, I think it's customizing the lock screen. The new the set of tools that Apple created for lock screen customization in 16 is really remarkable. And they're one of the things that truly surprised me when I was using the iPhone, and in a way that maybe not even home screen widgets 2 years ago in iOS 14 did. Because one of the things that one of the concepts, one of the ideas that I talk about in the story is how I really believe that the glanceability aspect of the new lock screen widgets makes a lot more sense than glanceable widgets on the home screen from iOS 14. I never believed in this theory, this idea that Apple has been trying to sell for the past couple of years of home screen widgets being glanceable and being perfect for glancing at information. You can use them for that, for sure you can, but I feel like glanceability on the home screen is an anomaly. I think glanceable widgets on the home screen are not what they're meant to be. And that I think it's because Apple decided to build WidgetKit with Swift UI 2 years ago. That's a new framework. And I feel like it's so obvious to me that those widgets are meant to be interactive. Home screen widgets are meant to be interacted with. You can use them to glance at stuff, but really you should be able to interact with them and to touch them and to have controls in them. And I'll just bring 2 examples here to support my theory. One of them, on Android, the music widget made by Apple, so the Apple Music widget made by Apple is an interactive widget, meaning that given the possibility, given the opportunity, Apple knows that people would love to have a now playing widget that you can control and place on your primary home screen, because they do so on Android, where the widget framework lets them do that. And the second example is the fact that some of Apple's own apps already use private APIs on the home screen to fake their way around having interactivity in their widgets. For example, shortcuts and contacts. They have home screen widgets. They're not glanceable. They are interactive. And developers cannot do that. But on the lock screen, now that's where the glanceability makes a lot of sense. And especially in the context of an always-on display with an always-on lock screen, the ability to quickly glance at your iPhone's display and see almost real-time data come through from the lock screen without having to interact with it, it's just useful for things like checking on a timer or seeing what your next calendar event is or seeing whether you have, rain coming your way in an hour or something. That kind of glanceability makes more sense because it's designed for a space, for an area of iOS that is meant to be glanceable. There is a one-to-one relationship between the lock screen, which is a glanceable space, and glanceable widgets. Like, they are a perfect match.
Yeah, they really are. I mean, I've really enjoyed things like, for instance, Parcels widget, because I can see what packages are coming today. And, also Timery has a whole set of widgets and Carrot weather as well. There's a lot here.
Yeah. And so that's one of the themes of the review. Like this glanceability finally making more sense in the place where it was maybe meant to be all along.
Mm-hmm.
But obviously the lock screen stuff goes well beyond widgets. In fact, I think most people will not even start from widgets. I think most people will start from the wallpapers and from the fact that you can have multiple lock screens. Just like you can have multiple home screens, now you can have multiple lock screens. And I think Apple has gone above and beyond what I was expecting here. In every regard, really. The collection of built-in wallpapers that they have, collecting all these wallpapers that they have done and maybe even teased over the years, like the clownfish wallpaper that never actually came out with the original iPhone. It was only showcased by Steve Jobs at the iPhone event, but it was never actually released. Bringing back those wallpapers and, of course, upscaling them and redoing them for modern generations of iPhones. All those collections like Pride, Unity, the bubble wallpapers, all of those coming together in a single wallpaper gallery, that's been really remarkable to see. And a couple of other things I want to point out here. First is the ability, for the first time ever, to create a color wallpaper with a gradient without having to use a third-party utility or a shortcut.
And it's so easy to make ones that look so nice.
And it's so easy. It's so easy to make one that looks so good on the lock screen and the home screen. Like they have a built-in color picker. They have a built-in like opacity control. You can define all these different values, and you can make the color wallpaper that you love. And you can make multiple ones if you want to. And second is the photos integration. This, I think, will be a big deal for a lot of people.
Oh, yeah, I love this so much.
People love to put photos of their loved ones, of their dogs, of their pets, of their favorite memories on the lock screen, even more than on the home screen, because on the home screen, you want to put icons and widgets. You got stuff in front of the photo. But on the lock screen, when you wake up the phone and you see a photo of your partner or your kids or your dog or your cat or whatever, like that puts a smile on your face, right? It's a nice thing to have. And in iOS 16, with the lock screen stuff, with the photos integration, whether you pick a favorite image yourself or whether you use the incredible photo shuffle feature that you can control in a couple of different ways. You can have a manual photo shuffle that shuffles through a selection of photos that you chose, or an automatic photo shuffle that uses the iOS built-in intelligence to, say, shuffle through photos of a specific person as recognized by photos, or shuffle through photos of dogs, or shuffle through photos of a landscape. And you can define a schedule. You have all these different controls that are so well designed and so well presented that I think a lot more people, for the first time ever, am using a photo-based lock screen, which is something that I've never done before because I get bored with using the same photo over and over. But with the photo shuffle, that makes it possible. And I selected 50 photos of Zelda and Ginger, my dogs. And now every hour, the iPhone shuffles through them. And I see a different photo of Zelda and Ginger. And then if I want, periodically, I can go in and change those photos. It's incredible. So I think a lot of people will spend a lot of time tinkering around, playing around with the lock screen customization stuff, even more so than widgets, because you have so many different options and because it's fun. It's just a fun thing to do.
Well, and the other thing that it does enable something with widgets that I think is really interesting. There's so many interlocking pieces here. One of the things I know you make a point of in your review is that you'd like to have more space for widgets because you've only got one row beneath the time, and then you've got the inline widget at the top above the time. And with wallpapers, with setting up separate lock screens, you can move very easily between lock screens and have different sets of widgets for each of those wallpapers for different parts of your day. And then you can tie them to focus modes too, which we'll get to, I know, which kind of makes them, allows you to set up things that are relevant to your work or your personal life or activities that you're interested in and do. There's all kinds of options here. And I think it really opens up a lot of possibilities. I did think in particular, one thing that you said in the review struck me is that you wished it were easier to move between lock screens. And I agree with you there. You do have to do the long press on the lock screen and then swipe between them. It's a little bit like the watch, but it's not as easy as the watch.
Yeah, and the watch is faster because you can just swipe through your watch faces. And I do wish that it was easier on the iPhone as well. Although I don't know if Apple has a gesture for it. Now the 3D touch is gone. and they don't have the
Right.
multiple levels of pressure, maybe you could do a 2-finger swipe or something. I don't know. But I do want to talk about those focus modes and the other feature of 16, which is the focus filters. So focus modes are getting better in a couple of ways. One of them being that it's easier now to put together a focus mode for you from scratch. It's less work than before because now you can also, basically now you have 2 ways to build a focus mode when it comes to choosing the notifications. You can choose to have an allow list or a silence list. So if you just want to allow selected people and silence everybody else, it's easier than before. And if you just want to silence specific people and allow everything else, that's also possible. So you have these 2 different modes that you can go in, depending on what you want to achieve with one of your focus modes. And I really think that helps a lot in terms of removing the friction, making it feel less like work when you're setting up a focus mode for yourself.
Yeah, exactly. One of the tips I would give people is that I found it really handy during the beta period to set up a focus mode that lets most things through and then kind of use it for a while. And as I used it and saw myself being annoyed by certain things coming through, they can just go back in and eliminate those notifications for that particular focus. You don't have to kind of do it all at once.
Yeah, exactly. So yeah, I've been I'm still thinking about what I want to do with my focus modes.
Mm-hmm.
It's a work in progress because I didn't have when I'm working on the review, I'm mostly thinking about the review. I'm not thinking about myself, which is a whole thing. I should take better care of myself in the summer, but that's a different topic for a different time. But yeah, now that it's out, now that it's done, I want to think about okay, so now what do I do with these things? So we'll see what happens. But I do want to mention focus filters, which is a new feature of iOS 16. So filters are interesting because they change what focus is in a way. So focus came out last year as a fancy do not disturb, basically, right? As an evolution of do not disturb. Do not disturb is in fact one of the built-in focus modes. And the idea was you can have different flavors of do not disturb for different moments of your life. But with focus filters, Apple is going beyond that, and they're saying, okay, what if instead of just controlling notifications, you could also control the content that you see inside of your favorite apps? And that's the idea behind focus filters. Developers can participate. They can adopt this technology, which is, funnily enough, is based on the App Intents framework. So it's literally powered by shortcuts, this kind of stuff.
Yeah.
Which is fascinating. This framework is powering a lot of things lately in iOS 16. But the idea is you can decide, for example, in my work focus, when I open Mail or when I open Fantastical, I just want to see this inbox. I just want to see this calendar set. I don't want to see my personal stuff. And the opposite is also true. When I'm in, when I'm in my fitness mode, I don't want to see work notifications, sure, but literally when I open Mail, I don't want to see the mailbox at all. So they are extending focus to actually hiding content from apps interfaces. From when you open the app, you don't see certain things. And developers can choose, right? That kind of behavior. They can do whatever they want. One of the examples that I mentioned in the review is GoodLinks. GoodLinks, the Read Later app. They are implementing focus filters to do something very fascinating, which is when you have a focus mode enabled, you can define a tag in the focus settings, in the focus filters settings. And when you have that focus mode enabled, you will only see articles in your queue that have that specific tag. So for example, if you have a gaming focus and you open GoodLinks and you set up the app filter, you can say, when I'm in this mode, I just want to see video game related articles, like reviews or interviews with game developers. And so this idea, like going beyond the default examples of Mail and Calendar and a Safari tab group, I think it'll be really interesting to see what developers do here with these focus integrations. And, there's also the app filters, which are dark mode and low power mode, but I'm more intrigued by the app filters because third-party developers will be able to integrate with those.
Right, I am too, and I think it's just fascinating to me because we both know people who have done things like use different email clients, one for work, one for personal, or reminder task manager apps, one for work, one for personal, as a way of separating those things from each other. And now you don't have to do that. If if you like using Apple Mail for everything, you can, and you can hide one of those mailboxes that you don't want to see during a particular focus. So I think that's a powerful tool that will allow developers to create environments for their users that keep them in their app and don't make them go looking for different solutions, because you can customize it right inside those apps themselves.
Yeah.
This episode of App Stories is brought to you by Memberful. Memberful is the easiest way to sell memberships to your audience, used by the biggest creators on the web. Memberful handles all the hard stuff, so you can focus on what you do best while earning revenue quickly. We've been using Memberful for years at MacStories. It's the foundation of Club MacStories. It provides everything we need to run the membership program with all of its different tiers and all of its different perks, including sales, downloads, and a whole lot more. If you're looking to add membership to your existing business, you want a solution that works with your existing technology, so you can launch a new revenue stream without rebuilding your entire tech stack. That's why we're still using Memberful. We have a custom technology stack that we call Calliope for Club MacStories, and Memberful fits into it perfectly. Memberful seamlessly integrates. Memberful will integrate seamlessly with the tools that you use too. Things like WordPress, MailChimp, Discord, and a lot more. And it maintains a full-featured GraphQL API, webhooks, and OAuth single sign-on to make it easy to integrate seamlessly with any stack. Plus, Memberful maintains a best-in-class WordPress plugin to add membership and content restriction to your website. You can use a custom domain name, so everything is fully branded under your name. You can connect directly with Stripe for secure payments, which is something that we do too, and it handles all of your transactional emails. Memberful has everything you need to run a membership program, including custom branding, gift subscriptions, Apple Pay, free and paid trials, private podcasts, in-house newsletters, referrals, and a lot more. You have full control and ownership of your audience, your brand, and your membership. That's what makes Memberful unique and powerful. Get started with a free, no credit card required trial today by going to memberful.com/appstories. Again, that URL to check out what Memberful can do for you is memberful.com/appstories. Our thanks to Memberful for their support of the show.
All right, app shortcuts. You want to talk about app shortcuts?
I do. I'm intrigued by these. I've got a handful of them showing up already with some of the betas that I have, and I've seen a lot of developers talking about them on Twitter and elsewhere. So what exactly is this all about? How is this, I guess, different, for instance, from the add to Siri feature that we've had for a while?
Yeah, so this system replaces the add to Siri button, which I don't think has been deprecated. It still works. If you try an old app that has the add to Siri button, that still works. But Apple has a new system, and they really want developers to use the new one.
And not that many people have really ever used add to Siri. I mean, it didn't get it didn't catch on the way that I think Apple probably would have hoped it would have.
Yeah. So a good way to think about this, I think I described it as such in a couple of App Stories episodes ago. When it comes to shortcuts and app integrations with shortcuts, Apple is putting the burden on developers now instead of users.
Right.
So one of the problems with the Shortcuts app is that people had no idea, people who don't read MacStories, people who are outside of our circle had no idea what to do with the Shortcuts app. They opened the app and it was empty, right? Or they opened the gallery and, it wasn't personalized for them. They were like, I'm going to open the gallery, but all of these shortcuts, I don't know what to do with them. I use different apps. And sure, Apple tried a couple of years ago to add the starter pack folder to the Shortcuts app. But then again, there was a generic collection of built-in shortcuts that were not personalized for users. And so how do you personalize? Here's the dilemma that Apple faced. How do you personalize an app used or likely to be used by millions of people? How do you personalize the app for each of those individuals? And the answer is you can't. Obviously, it's impossible unless you told developers, look, it's your job now to build these app shortcuts and to make them discoverable right away. And this is the idea behind app shortcuts. When you download an app from the App Store that has been updated for iOS 16, the developer of that app can include a default set of app shortcuts. These are one action shortcuts that do one thing, one specific thing in the app that contains them. It's the same system as before. These are the simple shortcuts, what used to be called Siri shortcuts, I guess, that previously you had to manually add to Siri by recording a custom phrase with the Add to Siri button that John mentioned. Now it's the opposite. Now these shortcuts are ready to use. They're good to go. You don't need to record a custom phrase. You don't need to add them to Siri. You don't need to discover them. When you open the Shortcuts app, so let's say you update to iOS 16, a bunch of your favorite apps update as well. You open the Shortcuts app, it's empty, right? No, it's not empty anymore. You scroll to the bottom of the Shortcuts sidebar, and you will see this new section called App Shortcuts. And it's got all the icons of the apps that this is the key point, it's got all the icons of the apps that you use. So it's inherently personalized for you because it's based on the apps that you use. Not the apps that I use, not the apps that John uses, but the apps that you got on your iPhone. And that's the idea. You can start using the shortcuts right away without having to do anything else. You just tap on the button and it does something and you realize, oh, this is actually useful. This shortcut saves me a bit of time in this app that I already use. But of course, that only goes so far in terms of discoverability of these shortcuts. What if you never open the Shortcuts app? Well, you will still find those app shortcuts because they are built in, created by developers. There's no need to record an invocation phrase anymore. They will also show up in other places. They will show up in Siri. They will show up in Spotlight. And when you're using one of your favorite apps, you may stumble upon this thing called a Siri tip, which is basically like an informational banner that tells you, hey, if you want later, you can run these shortcuts. That's one of the things that developers can do now. Instead of having you add a shortcut to Siri, those shortcuts are basically opt-out. It's the difference between opt-in and opt-out. Now shortcuts are opt-out. You can, by the way, and this is mentioned in the review, you can literally opt out of these shortcuts. You can, if you want to. There's a configuration page where you can say, I don't want to see this in Spotlight and Siri, but they are enabled by default. And I think Apple this time, it's fine to say they finally got it, but I do think that this time they are getting it right. In terms of how do you explain the Shortcuts app to people, this is a good way to explain what shortcuts can do by teaching them progressively, starting from their favorite apps. And then if you want, you can use that app shortcut as the foundation for a custom shortcut. You can use it as a template to do something custom yourself. But also with these app shortcuts, even if you never go the custom route, even if you never download a shortcut from MacStories or make a custom shortcut yourself, the Shortcuts app will have immediate value for you in iOS 16 because it'll never be empty.
Yeah, it's really the first time in a lot of ways when you think about it that Shortcuts has had that kind of value for users, because you're right, there is that initial learning curve that makes it really hard to get started with shortcuts, and these are going to be built in and right there. Yeah. I'm glad that they can be shut off in the Spotlight search, because I do wonder if you have a lot of apps installed, whether this is going to kind of flood the results. We'll have to see. I haven't seen that yet, but then again, I'm not using that many apps currently that incorporate this, so we'll have to see. But hopefully, developers will kind of strike the right balance between providing those core features that make sense using with Siri and with shortcuts and not overdo it. But I don't know. Yeah. We'll see.
Yeah. So for the final part of this episode, I figured, because we talked about apps so much this summer on MacStories, we already covered the changes to shortcuts, to reminders, to notes, to Safari. Like, we've gone through all of that. I want to point out just briefly the everything else chapter in the review, because it's one of MacStories readers' favorite chapters, because it's the chapter where you find all the good hidden stuff.
Right, all the little tidbits that are actually hard to discover because they might be a footnote in a product page somewhere, or not even mentioned on stage at WWDC. So.
Yeah, like you can copy your Wi-Fi password now.
Amazing.
You can finally, 15 years into the iPhone's existence, you can finally copy your Wi-Fi network's password from settings. But like the unit conversion stuff, which I wrote about this summer, and the measurement conversion stuff, that's really well done. All the live text related changes, all that kind of stuff that goes into the everything else chapter. Make sure it's chapter 7. This year, the review is only 8 chapters. It's a more compact review than before, but that chapter, I care about it a lot because it's those features that are so random, right? Seemingly so random that they don't fit anywhere else. Like, now developers can do shared with you, the iMessage feature that's now also available to third-party developers, or the new copy and delete button.
I was just about to mention that.
Screenshot markup tool, like that feature is so useful. Now you can take a screenshot, annotate it, and then in one go you can copy and delete. So you can open iMessage, paste a screenshot, but that screenshot is already gone. It won't be in your photos library. So
yeah, I know you mentioned data detectors, but the stuff that Apple's doing with live text in the camera and in video and stuff is really amazing. That feature, I use it all the time now for all sorts of things.
Yeah. So make sure to check out that chapter. And of course, as a nice companion to all of this, the summer series that we've done and that John has spent a lot of time working on this summer to both help me with the review to get it done in time, but also to dive a little deeper into these app-related updates for all of Apple's platforms. John was able to test a new Home app. I wrote about shared libraries. Make sure you don't miss the details of how the shared environment was put together on John's iPhone. That's always a fun story. So yeah, the summer series is a nice extra, content for the iOS review. Lastly, I do want to touch upon the theme, the one thing that I had for this year's review, which is the idea of when's the last time your iPhone truly surprised you? That's the opening question of the intro, and it's also the final question in the conclusion. I sort of took a bit of poetic liberty there with my structure, in having this question at the beginning and the very end. So I had a bit of fun there. But yeah, let me ask you, when was the last time your iPhone truly surprised you, John?
Yeah, that's a good question.
Right? You got to think about it.
I think it was the iPhone 10 for me.
Yeah.
I think it really was. Yeah. And it was because of the hardware changes. It wasn't a software thing, which is a little different. But yeah, it was the iPhone 10. That model iPhone just really came out of nowhere, and it's one of my all-time favorite phones.
Yeah. And that's the idea behind the review. Like, usually when it's very likely that when you ask this question, when's the last time you were truly surprised by your iPhone, usually the answer is hardware related. And that shouldn't come as a surprise, right? Because Apple, they make their own hardware. So it's very likely that you're going to be surprised every once in a while. But also I think it speaks to something else, which is innovations in iPhone software has become more rare these days because the obvious stuff has been taken care of. Like, I don't know, when's the last time macOS surprised you and you'd be like, geez, right. I don't know. This thing has been around for 30 years.
Maybe in 1990, I don't know.
Right? And I think we are maybe approaching the same with iOS. It's a mature operating system, and software-related surprises are harder to come by.
Yeah, that's
and
a good
I think
point.
for me, the lock screen is one of them. Because like I can recall this moment a few weeks ago in early August, that I was there just playing around with my phone, and suddenly I realized I spent 2 hours just playing with my phone, playing around with the lock screen, customizing the lock screen, and doing things with widgets and wallpapers, things and multiple lock screens, and things that I don't know, until a couple of years ago, like changing the font and the color of the font on the lock screen. Until a few years ago, I would have thought, no, that's unthinkable. Johnny Ive would never allow that to be changed. And so that, I think, for me personally, that made me feel like in software, I can still be surprised. And it happened with iOS 16, which is not a huge update, but the lock screen stuff is going to be incredible for people. And it truly surprised me. And so I had this idea, and I actually had this idea in June, like, let's try this angle. Like, when's the last time your iPhone truly surprised you? And it kind of developed from there. And so, yeah, customization is back. And that's also actually the opening line from the story. Customization is back. And, under the on the website, you will see that's the opening line, and then that question. And customization is back. Apple is having fun. We're having fun. This is a fun update. And I hope that people will have fun with the review and also find it useful.
Yeah, and I hope that people do what Federico did, which is just lose themselves in these settings and the things that you can customize. Because I actually did the same thing at the DMV earlier this summer because I was stuck waiting trying to get my new driver's license, had a bad internet connection. And so I didn't really have time to do anything other than fiddle around with wallpapers, focus, widgets, focus modes, all that stuff. And yeah, it was, it's to me, a tool that is both easy to use, but surprisingly deep, and you can really make it your own as a result. All right, Federico. Well, congratulations again on another iOS review. It's good to have it out there, and I hope people are enjoying it. I want to thank our sponsors again for this episode. That's Pillow and Memberful. You can find me and Federico over at MacStories.net. Federico is on Twitter and Instagram, where he's at Viticci. That's VITICCI. And I'm at John Voorhees. JOHNVOORHWS. Talk to you next week, Federico.
Ciao, John.